Okay, good morning, everyone. Perek Ches Mishna Ches. I don't know about you, but my morning already started with some excitement. I had to get a bumblebee out from my playroom, so I'm already my day is already kind of worked up. All right, Perek Ches Mishna Ches. Ein loikchem avodim v'karkois v'hema tameya v'demei shvius. Money of Shvita money. That means money that was exchanged for Shvita produce. And as we've learned before, that money takes on now the sanctity of Shemitah. You cannot use that money to purchase slaves, land, or non-kosher animal. And that's because the same way that the Shemitah produce is meant to be used for consumption, there is no consumption when it comes to these three things of slaves, land, or non-kosher animal. You cannot consume them. As we said, the Torah says that Shemitah produce is la'achla for eating or things similar to eating, and the kind of and that means a benefit as you consume it, as you eliminate it, and that doesn't happen by these things. You don't consume slaves, you don't consume land, and you may not consume a non-kosher animal. But that would imply that a kosher animal you could use Shemitah money to buy a kosher animal. And the kosher animal will take on the sanctity of Shemitah, and you have to treat it like Shemitah produce, but you should be able to do that. So the Yad Avram brings down here in a footnote, just interesting halacha, that is, according to the opinion accepted as halacha, one may not purchase live animals, even if kosher, from Shemitah produce, meaning either to use the produce itself or the money exchanged for it, to preclude the possibility of someone raising entire herds of animals subject to Shemitah laws. The presence of large numbers of animals possessing Shemitah sanctity would inevitably lead to an inadvertent violation of those laws. So again, if I'm going to buy an animal with the Shemitah produce, it's going to get the sanctity of Shemitah. It's going to be restricted on what you could use it for. So if you start, gathering herds of animals with that kind of status, inadvertently something's going to go wrong. And therefore, the halacha is you cannot buy a live animal, even a kosher one. A live animal you cannot buy with Shemitah produce or with Shemitah money. But once the animal is shechted, once the animal is slaughtered, and it's meat, it's kosher meat, you can now use the Shemitah money or produce to purchase it, because of the fact that now you're using the Shemitah money for purposes of consumption. Okay, the imlakach. Now, what if you did use the money for that? You used the money and you bought a slave, and you bought land, or you bought a non-kosher animal. What happens now? Says the Mishna, yoicha kenegda. The Mishna says you now have to purchase produce, the same value of the money that you spend the money for, and now you have to buy the produce equal in value to that money that you gave, and treat it like Shemitah produce. So if I use the money in the wrong way, I went ahead and I used this land to buy a non-kosher animal. So this non-kosher animal that's by me doesn't have the sanctity of Shemitah. It can't get the sanctity of Shemitah. It's not possible for it to get it. But being that I went ahead and I misused the Shemitah money, I now have to make up for that and buy Shemitah produce the same value of that money that I gave away, and treat that Shemitah produce and treat that produce like Shemitah produce. Now, what's the understanding of this halacha? What's the understanding of this amount of produce that I buy equal to the amount of money, Shemitah money that I used, and treat it like Shemitah? What's the understanding behind it? So there's really two ways to look at it. And depending on the situation, either both ways are relevant or only one way is relevant. And one way to look at it is as a fine. It's a penalty. The sage put a penalty on a person who misused the Shemitah money like this. To make up for it, he's got to now buy produce equal amount to the value of money that he misused, and treat the Shemitah produce and treat this produce that he bought like Shemitah. It's a fine. It's a penalty. You misused the money. You gave away this value, the Shemitah money that you shouldn't have. Now you got to make it up for it. It's a penalty. But there's a Rashi that the commentaries say based on that Rashi, and it really will depend on the situation, is that actually this works by taking this produce and treating it like Shemitah. What you're actually doing is you are redeeming the Shemitah money that you gave away. Meaning, Shemitah money you gave away to buy a non-kosher animal. Now that Shemitah money is now sitting by somebody else. So what you have to do now is you've got to redeem the money, just like we learned before. If I take that money and I exchange it for something else, the sanctity goes at that money and goes on the new thing. Well, that's what you're doing here. When you separate that produce, that's not Shemitah produce, but you're separating it with the same value of the Shemitah money that you gave away, what you are doing now is you are redeeming that money. That the Kedusha, the sanctity of Shemitah on that money is not going on this food. That's how, based on the Rashi, the commentaries say, according to Rashi, this is how it would work. Now, as we're going to see, it can be either or, depending on the situation. But we do approach what we're doing, like Rashi, that it is a redemption of that money. You're taking the sanctity of Shemitah off that money that you gave for the wrong thing, and you're now transferring that sanctity onto this produce, if that's possible to do, which again, in this case, you gave the money away to someone. The money's now by someone. So you'll transfer the sanctity from that money onto this produce. We will see cases where it's not going to be possible, and you still have to separate. You still have to take produce the same value, the same value as the money you gave away, and treat it like Shemitah produce. So you see, in certain cases, it's going to be a penalty, but in certain cases, it's going to act like a redemption. So that's the meaning behind it. If you did buy, you use Shemitah money to buy these things, you shouldn't have Yoicha Kenegdan. You now eat an amount equal to the value of the money you gave away. Now, just to add to what we just said before about redemption, as we said yesterday, if we're talking about the Shemitah produce itself, you can never redeem the Shemitah produce itself. The original Shemitah produce always retains its sanctity of Shvius, even if you exchange something for it. Now, next halacha, another halacha, what you may not use Shemitah money for. And the same thing, that's a Shemitah money, even Shemitah produce included. Ein mevian kinim zavim v'kinei zavais v'kinei yoldais v'demei shvius. You may not use the money of Shemitah to buy bird offerings of a zav, bird offerings of a zava, bird offerings of a woman who gave birth. The Torah talks about a number of cases where bird offerings have to be given as part of the process of purification that a person has to go through under certain circumstances. A man can be called a zav. Zav comes from the word flow. There's a certain type of flow that can emanate from a man. If he sees it 3 times, it makes him impure as a zav, which means he will remain impure as a zav till he has 7 clean days without this emission coming out of him. Once the 7 clean days are over, a zav has to immerse himself in spring water. A regular mikveh doesn't work for a zav. He's got to use natural. He's got to use water from a spring in order to make himself pure. Rainwater wouldn't work. And then afterwards, he's got to bring 2 birds as part of his atonement, part of his purification process. One of those birds is a ola, is a burnt offering, entirely burnt. The other one is a chatas, is a sin offering. A zav is a woman who also has her flow beyond her regular flow that she has. She has a flow beyond that. Again, she sees it 3 times. Won't get into all the details of this halacha, but she becomes a zava. She has to now go through a week of being clean, not having any kind of more of a flow. And then after that, she too has to bring a sacrifice of 2 birds. A yoledes means a woman who gave birth. The Torah says a yoledes, after a week after her giving birth, if circumstances allow, she can go to the mikveh, be permissible to her husband. But then, depending if it's for a boy or for a girl, for a boy it's 40 days, for a girl it's 80 days. She may not go to the Beis Hamikdash, she may not partake from a sacrifice. At the end of that, she has to bring sacrifices at the end. Again, she brings a bird as a sin offering and a lamb as a burnt offering. If she can't afford the lamb, she brings 2 birds to take care of the burnt offering and the sin offering. So the Mishna says you cannot use Shemitah money for to buy these sacrifices. And the question, now let's analyze that. Why? Why can't you? So understandable, the bird, that's a burnt offering, it's not going to be consumed. It's not similar to eating. You may not use the money unless it's being used for something you can consume. The problem is that the chatas, the sin offering, which is the bird offering that's a sin offering, the halacha is its blood is sprinkled on the altar, on the mizbeach, but the bird is actually completely eaten by the kohanim. So it is going to be consumed, it's going to be eaten. So then why couldn't you use the Shemitah money for the sin offering? So the Chazon Ish, the Yad Avram brings down from the Chazon Ish an explanation based on a halakha we previously learned. And we learned that you should not, this was in yesterday's Mishnah, you do not cook a vegetable of Shemitah in oil of Truma. He said, what's the reason for that? Because if you cook the vegetable of Truma and Shemitah, the vegetable of Shemitah and Truma oil, the vegetable is gonna absorb the oil. It's gonna have to be treated like Truma. Were a source of tumah, of impurity, to touch the vegetable, it's impurifying the Shemitah inside, the Truma inside of it, and you have to burn the whole thing. And we know you're not allowed to burn, not allowed to ruin Shemitah produce. So the Mishnah said before, don't even put the Shemitah produce into a situation where it's possible that it can become ruined. Don't cook it in the Truma oil, because by cooking the Truma oil, you now make it susceptible to being destroyed in case it comes into contact with a source of Truma. And therefore we said, don't do it at all. Don't bring it to that, don't put it in that kind of situation at all. Says the Chazon Ish, that's the explanation here also. If I use the Shemitah money for a sin offering, then that means that sin offering will now have the sanctity of Shemitah. It cannot be destroyed. If that bird offering were to touch a source of impurity, okay, so even as a carbon, it can't be used. If a carbon is eaten, if this carbon was supposed to, it comes into a state of impurity, now to eat it, you got to burn it. So it comes out now by using the Truma money to buy a sin offering, you've now transferred the sanctity of Shemitah onto the sin offering, and you're now creating a situation where it could be inevitable for this thing that has sanctity of Shemitah to be destroyed, to have to be destroyed. Because if it comes to contact with a source of impurity, it's going to have to be destroyed, because a carbon that comes into contact with a source of impurity has to be destroyed. And therefore, you cannot use the Shemitah money to buy the sin offering, so as not to create a situation where it could be inevitable that something with the sanctity of Shemitah would have to be destroyed and not be able to be eaten. Okay, so that's that halacha. Next halacha, last halacha. Last halacha has nothing to do with the money of Shemitah, purchasing anything. It has to do with using something of Shemitah itself in the wrong way. Ein sachin kelim b'shemen shel shvius. You cannot smear utensils with oil of Shemitah. You have olive oil of Shemitah. Now, we learned before, you want to smear it on your body, that's perfectly fine. That's similar to eating. You benefit as you eliminate it. That's just like eating. But here, what you want to do is, you have these vessels, you need to smear them with oil for whatever reason, and you want to use oil of Shemitah to do that. Mishna says you can't do that. That's basically, that's not similar enough to eating to be able to say I can do that. There's no human consumption involved, and therefore you're not allowed to do it. And if you did it, you did use the Truma oil for the purposes of smearing this this vessel. If you did it, then you've got to consume an amount equal to it. You're going to have to separate Shemitah produce, the same value of this oil, and treat it like Shemitah. Now, in this case, there's no redemption. There's nothing to redeem. You took the oil and you used it. There's nothing to redeem. So here, clearly, it's a penalty. It's not going to be any kind of redemption. Okay, that is Mishna Ches. Now we'll do the Sefer HaMitzvot. Mitzvahs lo yisaseh, a prohibition, shelo yishava b'shem avodah zarah, not to swear by the name of an idol. Shenemar, as it says, b'shem Elohim achayirim, in the name of other gods that others make them into gods. Lo yisaskiru, you shall not mention. Shouldn't come onto your lips. Therefore, included in that is not to swear by an avodah zarah, to say, personally, I swear by this and this idol that I will do something. Okay, that that, or it's so. I swear by this and this idol that this is what happened. Can't do that. Not can you make a vow. A vow is a different form of promising something. You can't make a vow by the name of an idol. Including this prohibition, let's say you have a non-Jew and he worships a certain idol, and to make him swear by that idol, you can't do that. You cannot bring it up. You cannot make it. You cannot bring it up. You cannot make it happen. That even a guy, this is maybe what he worships. Not allowed to worship it. A guy's not allowed to worship idols. So now making him swear by that is the same prohibition of not having the name of other gods on your lips. And even to use the name of an idol worship, not for the purposes of an oath, is also forbidden if you want to use it for a purpose. For instance, person shouldn't say to his friend, wait for me by that idol. You're not swearing by the idol, you're not worshiping the idol, not honoring the idol, but you're using it as a landmark. The kayetzba and anything similar to that, you cannot do. That also goes into the name of an idol shall come out on your lips. Means to say you shouldn't use the mentioning of an idol for a purpose. Now, avodah zarah that is inscribed in the scriptures, because there are names of idols that are brought down in Tanakh, you're allowed to say it. These are all idols mentioned in the Torah. You're allowed to mention their names. The problem is you may not use them in some way. So too, forget about telling the person, it's not just telling the person, swear by this. Causing others somehow, just causing it to happen, causing others to either make a vow or to make an oath by the name of an idol is forbidden to do. This applies in all places at all times, both by men and by women. Have a great day.